The plaque on this statue at Fort Benning reads, "Wherever brave men fight and die for freedom, you will find me."
With you. Watch the fire ants!
For 2 weeks last year, Mel Gibson and fellow cast members of We Were Soldiers endured heat, humidity, and Georgia chiggers, yet they got only a small taste of Ranger School at Fort Benning.
This is for the younger guys.
Unlike countless thousands of men who have trained on this red clay, Gibson's crew would go to war only on film. And yet, everyone involved with this project says it is more, much more than just a motion picture.
This movie shows the American soldier as he should be shown. Not as a doper, not as a guy playing Russian roulette in Saigon. Shows the American soldier as he really was in Vietnam.
Hal Moore, who Gibson portrays in the movie, was the colonel who led the first major battle of the Vietnam War.
That when we go into battle, I will be the first to set foot on the field, and I will be the last to step off, and I will leave no one behind.
Roger 6, we're in heavy contact! The danger of being overrun!
On Sunday, November 14th, 1965, at 10:48 in the morning, Moore and members of the Air Cavalry touched down in Ia Drang, a place known as the Valley of Death. It was like stepping into hell. The troops suddenly found themselves drastically outnumbered by a determined, experienced, well-armed enemy.
He's under strength against more men than he can count. He's got a whole platoon lost.
They're not lost. They're only cut off and surrounded.
Amazingly, Moore and his men fought their way out of an almost certain massacre. At the end of 3 days, 1,000 Vietnamese troops had been killed. The American death toll was 79, with not a man left behind, just as Moore had promised.
A responsibility to do honor and tribute to the guys that were there. Yeah, slightly intimidating.
A number of those who survived the battle, as well as family members of those who did not, returned to Fort Benning several weeks ago for a special screening of We Were Soldiers.
This project, this book is our heart.
Reporter Joe Galloway, played by Barry Pepper in the film, met Moore as a war correspondent after struggling to get to the front lines.
Well, I can't guarantee your safety.
Galloway never expected he would have to put down his camera and pick up a gun.
I thought, if I don't do this, I may die and all those around me may die as well. One rifle may make the difference. And if it does, then I've got to do that. And, you know, an experience like this, it changes your life. It changes the way you see life.
Years later, Galloway and Moore teamed up to write the book upon which We Were Soldiers is based. But they at first had little interest in seeing it made into a movie.
And this will be our horse.
In fact, they complain about it in the book, how Hollywood always screws it up. And it's interesting, the indictment was, if I can be specific, whetting their twisted political knives on the bones of our dead brothers, so that it becomes very personal. And that's the aspect from which I think we approached the film, was a very personal one.
The man who finally convinced Moore and Galloway to let him film We Were Soldiers was director and screenwriter Randall Wallace.
And I said, Mr. Wallace, I don't know you, so I have a question for you. And he said, what's your question? And I said, do you believe in heroes? And he said, I do.
Moore was sold too. Although he was on hand as a consultant during filming, he remained out of Wallace's way and now sings his praises loudly.
And Randall is the only director in Hollywood who could have done it and done it right.
The admiration is mutual, and it shows in every single frame of film Wallace put into We Were Soldiers.
Every man that flew into that battle knew he was unlikely to get back alive. This is courage almost beyond measure.
We Were Soldiers doesn't stop there. It also shows another side of war and a different kind of courage on the home front.
Do you know the most common thing an American soldier says when he's dying on the battlefield? Tell my wife.
I love her.
Death notices came in the form of Western Union telegrams. delivered not by representatives of the Army, but taxi drivers. Julie Moore, the colonel's wife, intercepted many and delivered them herself.
We have always said the Army takes care of its own, but it's really the wives that give that support to each other. There were 400 of us that stayed in Columbus, Georgia, when the division left.
A number of those killed in the Ia Drang Valley are buried at Fort Benning. Among them is a young sergeant named Jack Gell, whose widow, Rebecca Workentine, attended the recent screening with their 3 grown children.
My husband, a beautiful young person, a professional soldier, was serving his country somewhere that we didn't know much about, but that as many people was on Fort Benning, that they let someone in a car that I didn't know or have no connections to shove a paper at me telling me my husband had been killed. It was shocking.
In battle, it's a crapshoot. Whether or not you get shot, get hit.
After a visit to the cemetery, General Moore spoke at length of those who died, among them Jack Gell.
And Sergeant Gell's last words, according to Captain Nadal, to him, you know what those words are. Tell my wife I love her.